Yeah, baby, yeah. Austin Powers, International Man of Mystery, wasn't just a silly spy spoof. It was a razor-sharp satire born from personal pain, Hollywood battles, and wild risks that nearly killed the franchise before it began. Behind the neon suits and shagadelic catchphrases were moments of brutal studio interference, dangerous improvisation, and strange accidents that could have derailed everything. Today we're pulling back the curtain to reveal 20 weird, shocking, and hidden facts about Austin Powers. And stick around. Our bonus fact uncovers a bizarre studio demand that even die-hard fans don't know. Let's dive in. Mike Myers' grief sparked Austin Powers. Most people think Austin Powers was born from sheer comedy. But it wasn't jokes, it was grief. After Mike Myers lost his father to Alzheimer's in 1991, he channeled that pain into nostalgia. His dad had raised him on James Bond flicks, Peter Sellers comedy, and swinging 60s pop culture. Myers later admitted the Austin character was a way to keep his father's memory alive. Without tragedy, there might never have been the ridiculous spy in velvet suits. Beneath the goofy teeth and catchphrases, the film was an emotional tribute disguised as parody. What audiences didn't know was that every "yeah, baby" carried a whisper of heartbreak. It wasn't just a spoof, it was therapy. The studio wanted to kill the British humor. New Line Cinema didn't trust American audiences to get British comedy. Executives tried to cut out UK-style jokes and demanded rewrites that leaned more into slapstick. At one point, they even suggested changing Austin's character into a failed American lounge singer instead of a shagadelic Brit. Myers fought hard to keep the dry wit intact, often refusing script notes and threatening to walk. The standoff got so heated that some early cuts looked nothing like the movie we know today. If Myers hadn't stood his ground, Austin might have been another bland American spoof. Instead, he stayed proudly, awkwardly British, confusing some, but enchanting many. Elizabeth Hurley almost quit over the robot scene. The now iconic scene with fembots in lingerie was not fun to film. Elizabeth Hurley, cast as Vanessa Kensington, felt the sequence objectified women and almost walked off set. Reports say she argued with Myers and director Jay Roach, questioning if the gag undermined Vanessa's intelligence. Hurley only agreed after the writers gave her character more sarcastic bite and agency in later scenes. Ironically, that clash helped cement Vanessa as a sharper, more modern Bond girl parody. But what fans didn't know was that her performance came with a real power struggle behind the cameras, not passive eye candy, a fighter. The teeth were almost too real. Austin's grotesque teeth became a visual trademark, but they weren't a cheap gag. Myers had them designed by a real Hollywood dentist who crafted prosthetics modeled after authentic 1960s British dental records. They were so accurate that extras on set were reportedly uncomfortable looking directly at him. The false teeth caused speech issues too, forcing Myers to exaggerate his voice and movements, ironically fueling Austin's bizarre energy, not just a sight gag. They reshaped how Myers acted the entire role. Behind the laugh, discomfort, pain, and genius improvisation. A car stunt nearly went fatal. One of the funniest gags in the movie, the Austin Powers airport scene with the jumbo novelty luggage cart, was almost a disaster. The clunky machine, designed for laughs, malfunctioned mid-shoot. Hurley and Myers were strapped inside, and the brakes failed during rehearsal. Crew members had to physically jump in front to stop it. Myers later joked that dying in a silly prop car would have been the perfect Austin ending. But what audiences didn't realize was that one of the lightest, dumbest set pieces nearly turned into tragedy. Comedy skating on the edge of catastrophe. The whole movie was almost straight to video. Believe it or not, Austin Powers was considered too weird to release theatrically. New Line executives thought the groovy spy shtick wouldn't sell in 1997, a decade dominated by action blockbusters and dark thrillers. The studio even floated the idea of dumping it straight to video. Myers was furious, insisting it deserved the big screen. Director Jay Roach sided with him, arguing that the parody only worked as a larger-than-life theatrical experience. In the end, they secured a small theatrical release, but with minimal marketing. Word of mouth saved it. The very film, nearly shoved into bargain bins, instead exploded into a global comedy phenomenon. It wasn't destined for VHS dust. It was destined for cult immortality. Will Ferrell was humiliated on set. Before he became a comedy giant, Will Ferrell played Mustafa, the unlucky henchman who gets burned, shot, and dropped. But filming his death scene was brutal. The crew forced him to stay in a coffin-like prop for hours while smoke machines choked the air. Ferrell later joked that he thought he'd never breathe properly again. What audiences didn't realize, that role marked his first major Hollywood film credit. He suffered through claustrophobia and humiliation, but the scene showcased his bizarre, deadpan delivery. Not comfort, not glory, just smoke, panic, and comedy gold forged in misery. Michael York nearly refused his role. Michael York, the classically trained British actor who played Basil Exposition, didn't want to do the movie. He thought the script was juvenile and feared it would tarnish his Shakespearean reputation. Myers personally visited him, explaining that Basil was a parody of stiff Bond bureaucrats, not just a throwaway role. York eventually agreed, but only after seeing how clever the satire was. His dry, straight-faced delivery became the perfect counterbalance to Austin's lunacy. Ironically, York's hesitation turned into one of his most beloved cult performances. Not career damage, career reinvention. The sex jokes almost got it, an NC-17. The script was originally far raunchier than the final cut. Myers's first draft included explicit gags that horrified New Line's censors, scenes of Austin with experimental gadgets, and crude innuendos about Vanessa were flagged as too obscene. The MPAA threatened an NC-17 unless they toned it down. Myers reluctantly cut several jokes, but slipped in suggestive puns the censors overlooked. The result? A PG-13 comedy that pushed boundaries without tipping into smut. It wasn't sanitized innocence. It was careful subversion. Dirty jokes dressed in shagadelic charm. Dr. Evil's voice sparked a real lawsuit threat. Dr. Evil's bizarre accent wasn't random. Myers based it on Saturday Night Live producer Lorne Michaels, whom he famously impersonated backstage. When SNL insiders caught the resemblance, rumors spread that Michaels was furious. At one point, NBC executives reportedly hinted at possible legal action if the parody was too defamatory. Myers brushed it off, keeping the voice intact. Ironically, it became one of the most quoted parts of the movie, not just a villain voice, a Hollywood in-joke weaponized for cinema. The time travel ending confused test audiences. The original ending of Austin Powers included a far more complex time travel sequence. Test audiences were baffled. Some thought Austin was stuck in the 60s permanently, while others couldn't figure out how Vanessa fit into the timeline. The confusion nearly sank the movie before release. New Line executives forced reshoots, simplifying the finale so it ended with Austin and Vanessa celebrating in the present. Myers was reportedly frustrated, feeling the audience underestimated the satire. What fans didn't realize was that the final playful ending was born from panic, not a grand design, a compromise carved by confusion and fear of alienating viewers. The budget was pathetically small. Unlike the spy movies it parodied, Austin Powers wasn't shot with millions. Its entire budget was just $16.5 million, pennies compared to Tomorrow Never Dies, $110 million released the same year. The crew had to recycle sets, borrow costumes, and rely on thrift store props. Many of Austin's iconic outfits were literally pulled from vintage shops in Los Angeles. Even the lair sets were patched together from rejected sci-fi stage pieces. What audiences didn't see was a scrappy production crew working miracles with scraps. It wasn't lavish. It was guerrilla filmmaking dressed in velvet. The cameos that never happened. Myers originally wanted big-name cameos, including Sean Connery and Burt Bacharach playing themselves in extended roles. Connery reportedly laughed off the offer, refusing to mock Bond for a spoof. Bacharach agreed to appear, but only briefly in a musical gag. Dozens of cameo pitches fell through, forcing Myers to rely on rising comedians and theater actors instead. The absence of A-list stars actually worked in the film's favor, keeping the focus on its bizarre world, not celebrity gimmicks, not star power, pure parody power. Jay Roach. Almost got fired director. Jay Roach was relatively unknown and constantly clashed with studio executives. They felt he was too soft to control Myers's improvisations. At one point, they even considered replacing him mid-shoot. Roach saved himself by proving he could keep the chaos moving on schedule. His decision to allow Myers multiple takes for every scene, often 20 or more, gave the film its manic, unpredictable feel, not dismissal. Survival through adaptability. Roach's patience shaped the movie's comedy rhythm and cemented his career. Without that gamble, we might never have gotten Meet the Parents or Meet the Fockers. Seth Green wasn't supposed to return. Scott Evil was meant to be a one-off gag. The original draft killed him off with a failed assassination attempt by Dr. Evil himself. Seth Green convinced Myers that Scott should survive, arguing that the father-son dysfunction had comedic potential. Myers reluctantly agreed, and the character became essential to the sequels. Green's performance gave the films some of their sharpest family satire. What audiences didn't know was that Scott Evil's survival was a last-minute rewrite. Not expendable, essential. The Bond parody nearly sparked legal trouble. The James Bond estate did not laugh when Austin Powers premiered. MGM and Eon Productions, the guardians of Bond, examined the script for potential copyright infringement. Certain gags, like Dr. Evil's lair and the exaggerated henchman, were seen as dangerously close to specific Bond tropes. Lawyers circled, and whispers of a lawsuit reached the crew. Myers and Roach had to argue that parody fell under fair use, even adjusting a few visual references to avoid trouble. Ultimately, the Bond camp backed down, realizing the spoof boosted interest in their franchise. Not legal war. Legal brinkmanship with shaken, not stirred nerves. Verna Troyer. Almost didn't play Mini-Me. Though Mini-Me doesn't appear until the sequel, Verna Troyer's involvement began earlier. He was on the radar during the first film, as Myers pitched the idea of a smaller evil clone even before production wrapped. The studio resisted, calling it too cartoonish. Troyer only joined in The Spy Who Shagged Me, but his introduction was conceived in the shadow of the first film's success. Had International Man of Mystery flopped, Troyer's career-defining role wouldn't exist. Not sequel magic, seeds planted in uncertainty. Myers played hardball over control. Most comedians would let a studio polish their script, not Myers. He refused to hand over Austin Powers unless New Line granted him near-total creative control, writing, producing, and starring in multiple roles. Executives balked but eventually caved, knowing Myers's Wayne's World fame gave him leverage. This control led to endless improvisation on set, with Myers sometimes ignoring call sheets entirely. Crew members described days of chaos disguised as comedy. It wasn't smooth production, it was dictatorship masked by velvet. Deleted scenes were shockingly dark. While the movie feels playful, deleted footage reveals darker tones. One scene had Austin breaking down over his lost 60s friends, mourning that everyone he knew was dead or aged. Another depicted Dr. Evil brutally executing a henchman without humor. These sequences tested poorly, depressing audiences. Myers cut them, fearing they disrupted the farcical rhythm. Still, they showed how thin the line was between parody and tragedy. What audiences didn't know? Austin Powers nearly leaned into existential dread. not just comedy, a whisper of despair. The movie bombed in theaters. Despite becoming a pop culture juggernaut, Austin Powers underperformed on its initial theatrical run, earning just $67 million worldwide. Critics were lukewarm, calling it a one-joke movie. But something strange happened. The VHS release exploded. Dorm rooms, house parties, and midnight screenings turned Austin into a cult icon. The sequels only existed because the home video market resurrected him. It wasn't instant success. It was resurrection by tape deck, proving comedy's power in the age of rewinds. Bonus fact: the studio tried to ban the catchphrases. Perhaps the strangest behind-the-scenes battle was over the very lines fans quote to this day. Studio executives begged Myers to drop "Yeah, baby" and "Shagadelic," fearing they were too British and would alienate American audiences. Myers refused, claiming the phrases were essential to Austin's absurdity. Against all odds, the very lines the studio hated became marketing gold. Posters, trailers, toys, everything leaned on the words they nearly erased, not disposable catchphrases. Cultural lightning. Closing reflection. Austin Powers, International Man of Mystery, wasn't just a parody, it was a fight. Against grief, against studio interference, against failure. From near-death stunts to censorship battles, the film clawed its way into pop culture. What audiences laughed at was really the product of blood, grief, and stubborn defiance. So, tell me in the comments, what's your favorite Austin Powers moment? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell, because baby, these shagadelic secrets are just the beginning. Yeah, baby, yeah.